So 5 years ago, I was invited to take part in a Google Hangout with Sir Richard Branson and Elon Musk. And I said to Elon, what is the most challenging thing that you have ever done in business?
You got two kids, and it's like both kids make it.
So I'm now on the internet as the girl that made the billionaire cry.
There are people who it feels like they're so happy, they're shining. And many of them actually struggle.
I had a suicide attempt when I was 11 years old. And then I've had different times where I felt like I've been back there again.
What do you think are some of the most powerful tools that we can do in our day-to-day life that help us with our mental health?
I think it's like knowing that the micro moves are actually the mega moves, and knowing that the little things are the big things. Most people say when they're asked that they actually wouldn't want to have not gone through the hard thing because they've gained so much because of it. And I think that's fascinating.
I mean, I was one, even though I wasn't super conscious of it, it still affected me. And fuck, do I have a right to grieve about the death of my mother?
And I think grief is love. I would love to know, what was it that kept you going one more day?
Good morning in the morning, maybe good evening or good afternoon. Welcome back to Success Leaves Clues. Today I'm joined by Niyc Pidgeon. She's a psychologist, she's a speaker, she's the author of her brand new book, One More Day. I've been reading it for the last couple of days to prepare for this episode. It touched me, it changed me. It changed my perspective. You're in for a treat. We just recorded the episode. If it looks like I just cried, it's because I just cried. It's for sure emotional, it's valuable, and you're in for a treat. Without further ado, here is Niyc Pidgeon. And if you're listening to this episode, I also want to let you know, down below, there are free resources, numbers you can call if you feel like you need help, you need support, you are thinking of ending your life. There are resources, free resources available. Do not hesitate to reach out and ask for help. And without further ado, now here's Niyc Pidgeon. Well, Niyc, I said it before I pressed recording. The last couple of days, I've been busy reading your book. That's what my holiday was. Reading your book, laying at the pool, and I first want to compliment you because it felt like I got to know you. I'm not gonna lie, I cried a couple of times, and I had to pause multiple of times because I teared up and it did something with me. And when my favorite books are books when I have the feeling I have a conversation with the other person. And I think you did a phenomenal job. And I wanna start this episode by thanking you for this incredible book and what you, your mission. And maybe that's a good starting point, Niyc. Can you give us a little bit context about why you do what you do?
Well, thank you so much. That, honestly, I'm so grateful. And I appreciate that you can read a book about suicide prevention by the pool. Like, that was my hope and my wish, that this gets into the hands of people that really need it in a way that feels joy-filled and hopeful rather than something that's taboo. Mm-hmm. So I didn't ever think that I would be a positive psychologist that has a passion for suicide prevention, because positive psychology is all about how to live your happiest life. It's about the science of happiness, it's the science of success, and it looks at what goes right with people and the world rather than what goes wrong with people. And traditionally, we didn't actually even look at clinical populations or look at mental illness within positive psychology. But then after losing a couple of my best friends who died by suicide, I really felt called to do some investigating. So I became this person that would go out on hikes and would listen to audiobooks that were really deep in the world of suicidology specifically. And it got me thinking about how can I actually connect positive psychology with this huge body of work that is more focused on crisis intervention. Now, crisis intervention is not my work. I'm more focused on prevention and what we can do to prevent cognitive decline, whether that's individually and also together, so that we can live better lives and we can really protect our mental health and well-being along the way. So the curiosity kind of got the better of me, and it became something that I couldn't not write. So it really became this mission, like you said, and this calling that I just feel like we have to do better as people together and in the world. And once I discovered that there's so much that we can do, it felt really, really exciting for me to support people in actually making a start.
That's what I was fascinated about. The fact that I'm reading, so I don't have the physical copy. I'm reading everything on a Kindle.
I'll send you one.
Yes, please. But I'm in Bali.
If
Good
we can
luck.
get mail in Bali.
Good luck. If you send the book, if you get it to Bali, well, that is an accomplishment. That's an achievement. I was reading the book, and I thought exactly what you just mentioned. Your intention came through. I'm reading a book about suicide prevention. At the same time, it's not just sad, it's at times funny, and it feels light. It feels like I'm talking to a friend. And with this space that we have here today, I would like to give people a space, or let me rephrase it, a toolkit that they can use in the future, because at some point, not a single person is always here. Not a single person is always happy. And you talk about this in your book, that oftentimes with the people, there are people who it feels like they're so happy, they're shining. And many of them actually struggle and never talk about how they really feel. There is, I don't know if you know, probably you do. It's one of my, used to be one of my favorite actors, and still is one of my favorite actors, Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And I think he was an example of someone who was always shining, always making other people laugh. But unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. And I would like to join you on this mission today to do our very best to talk about tools, practical tools that everybody can do to navigate through those times or even prevent them. So let's maybe start with prevention. What do you think are some of the most powerful tools that we can do in our day-to-day life that help us with our mental health?
I think one of the important things to acknowledge is that it can bring up a lot of shame to admit that you're having a hard time.
Yes.
Certainly through my experience of having dark days where I felt like I might not get through the day and I don't have the coping skills, or it feels like it might be easier to give up. I know that I've really felt to myself, well, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. Because I don't want to bother anyone, or I don't want to burden anyone with my problems. Everyone else has got their own problems. So I'm just going to stay over here on my little island, isolated, and try and do my best. Now, that is actually incredibly dangerous. And I also don't recommend it for many different reasons. First of all, connection is a beautiful thing, and it's never one-sided. So what I've learned through being vulnerable with my friends and sharing more about the way that I feel is that it actually gives the other person something in them being able to support you too. And it has strengthened my relationships beyond belief to have just kind of let it all go and said, not feeling great today. And sometimes, honestly, my friends have had to force that upon me. They've shown up at my house and they've said, how are you really? And we've got into the practice of asking that question, which I think is a really simple way to start. How are you doing really? How are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? because having that conversation is very opening, and you have to be honest, because we're programmed to say, oh, Axel, I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you? I'm great. And it's almost like a conditioned response
Yeah.
rather than something that's connecting from heart to heart.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's really the place that we get to start.
Yeah, you rarely go to the gym and ask someone like, how are you? And that person responds, you know what? Actually, not so good. I do that sometimes, like just to break the pattern. But yeah, you said something really interesting, which if you think about it rationally, doesn't make sense, but yet we still do it. When we are going through tough times, often we want to isolate. We don't want to be a burden for other people. How can we, I mean, I could ask the question, why is that? And we would probably need 2 hours to uncover that. But how can we break that pattern?
I think we can break it for ourselves and also for each other. And it can feel really overwhelming when you're dealing with big emotions, whether that's sadness or it's grief, or sometimes it's literally the overwhelm of all of the things that you feel like you have to do in the day and the pressures of being able to do them or feeling like you can't make them happen. So I think first of all, like I love to brain dump everything onto paper. And this is a tool that I actually got from my first book, Now Is Your Chance. And I've carried it forwards through everything that I do now, because just having that mental overload and being able to take it off your plate, write it down, is a really, really simple place to start.
Yeah, I'm doing it while you're talking.
Good. I love this. Well done. Great student. I just think that it doesn't need to be hard, but we need to have really simple things that we can reach for. Because if you're trying to do a morning ritual that lasts 90 minutes and you're already overwhelmed, it can feel like such a mountain to climb to actually do that. So I believe in keeping it really simple. And I believe in looking at where it is that we can start. So it might be, I call them gateways. So gateway tools or gateway actions. Like, what is the thing that feels the easiest for you to do right now that can create a positive shift? So for me, it's usually putting on a meditation on YouTube, or it is playing my favorite music. And even if I'm not up dancing around straight away, it gives me a little something. And it connects me in with my heart, and I'll feel a different energetic shift. And then it feels like I can maybe choose another small step that I can take. And through that compounding of small steps in your day and then over time, you can look back and you can see, oh, you know what? I feel a little bit better than I did before. And I think that we get to do that for ourselves, but also for each other. So one of my other things I love to do is to get out for a walk. Sounds so basic, right? But when you're struggling, that's the thing that falls off. And it's like, I'm just going to sit here. I know I should go for a walk, but I'm not going to do it. So I have friends that will go and we'll meet up and we'll do a walk together. And that strengthens our relationship. It gets us to move our body, which moves our mood. It gets us outside into nature. So we're then able to experience the positive effects of green spaces.
Yes.
And I think that that's like helps you hit a lot of the different well-being markers within one simple thing.
I have a story that might show how big this, you call it in your book, micro moves. I love it. Those micro moves can make such a big difference. There was a time when let's say I honestly lived by your book title. That was my mantra, one more day. So I was going through cancer treatment, and it was like high doses of chemotherapy. And honestly, getting out of bed, going for a walk, that was my biggest accomplishment for many days. And it was like the biggest task. And every single time, I was so happy I did it. So those micro moves can make such a difference. And honestly, like still now, I'm healthy, I'm fine, I'm good. If I don't do my micro move of meditating early in the morning, 20 minutes, such a tiny thing if you think about it. 20 minutes is not a lot of time. We probably spend more time scrolling. It's such a micro move, but it makes such a big difference for me and for the people around me. Like I notice when I don't meditate, but also the people around me, they're like, Axel, you good?
Ooh. Like, are you okay?
Yeah, okay. If I don't go to the gym for like, if that never really happens or rarely happens, but if I don't go to the gym for like 3 or 4 days, such a micro move for many people probably, but it makes such a difference for me, right? And
Yeah. I think it's like knowing that the micro moves are actually the mega moves, and knowing that the little things are the big things.
yes, yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. I'm gonna try to actually go back mentally to that point when I didn't feel well, just for, I'm sure there are a couple of people listening and a couple of people in my life. That's also why your book touched a couple of spaces within me that just made me very emotional, and I know they will be listening. So for someone who's listening right now, I want to create this episode for them, who are maybe going through a tough time, don't have this drive to go outside, their business is not going well, they are struggling because of a breakup, maybe someone passed away. I have a lot of people here who either have some illness they deal with, cancer, or lost someone because of it. What could be, except what we just mentioned, what else could be tools they could be using? So what I heard so far is those micro moves and social connection. I love that part in your book where you talk about the importance of social connections. Such a simple thing, yet that's something most of us don't do.
Yeah, and it's also the number one protective factor when it comes to preventing suicide. So when we feel like we have places we belong, it boosts our well-being, and we're more likely to want to keep going one more day. So when I thought about that, I thought about, where do I feel like I belong? And that can be online communities. It can be within your friendships. It could be going to a gym, like you said. It could be going to a running club. It can be within your family. And I think getting intentional about finding more places to belong is something that's really important. They say that it's 60% or maybe even more than 60% now of us experience loneliness to the point that it interferes with our daily activities. And I just think that is so sad in a world that is so connected more than ever before in terms of technology, but we've become at the same time more disconnected than ever before. And I just think that connection and being together on this journey, it feels so much better. And we get to lighten the load when we share it. I get so passionate. Can you feel it? I'm like, it gets me so worked up because I know that there's things that we can do. So I know that just through having more conversations and talking helps, finding places to belong. Even when you look at theories and tools like practicing gratitude, we've known for a long, long time in positive psychology that practicing gratitude is a really powerful way of boosting your well-being. And writing a gratitude letter to someone that you've never properly thanked can actually shift your well-being for up to a month. Now, what I love about the more recent gratitude research is that they've shown that it's stronger when it's shared. So let's say you and I go in WhatsApp and we share gratitudes. It can be gratitudes for each other. It could also be gratitudes that we have independently, where I'm saying, like, I'm so grateful for my home, or I'm so grateful for the sunshine in Los Angeles today. You and I get into what I call a gratitude rampage in WhatsApp, okay? And then what happens is we create this vortex where we're energizing an upward spiral together. Rather than what can happen when you're on your own, is like you're energizing this downward spiral. Everything's going wrong. I feel so bad. Everything's so hard. I'm not going to make it through one more day. So it's about switching it and being able to do that together to create this uplifting energy.
I have an exercise for everybody who's listening, because I think listening is great. I think actually doing the things is usually the harder part. And I like what you just said. That's an exercise we usually do at our retreats. So if I ask you, you as in the listener, I'm excited to hear your answer as well, Nick. If I ask you the question, who loves you? Who comes up for you?
I mean, my first one was me. And I
Okay,
think
okay.
that's actually a good practice as well, because so much of our suffering can be perpetuated through our lack of self-love. And some of the times where I've caught myself in negative thinking, it's been me being hard and judging myself
Yes.
and making myself feel worse. So I definitely know that I have self-love. I know that my friends love me, my family love me. I know it makes me want to tell you who I love as well. Like it's making me want to do like in both ways.
So
God, the universe.
I asked my videographer the other day. He said his first response was God. Whoever
Yeah.
came up for you, there's obviously no right or wrong answer, but whoever came up for you, speak to that person or to that thing, or God or whoever or yourself. Send that person a message. If it's yourself, you can send a voice message to yourself. Sometimes speaking it out loud is such a game changer. But anyway, so let's say the answer is your mom. That's one of the most common answers that I hear. My mom, my brother. In my case, if I think about who loves me, I would say my sister. She adores me. So what I would tell people is send that person a voice message or call that person and just tell them, I know it's not your birthday. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you for XYZ, and be specific. It will make their day and it will make your day. And if you can just pause this podcast and do it right now, because otherwise you're not going to do it. If you say, I'll do it tomorrow, you're not going to do it. It is one of the most powerful things you can do. To just tell people, the little things are the big things. To just call someone randomly, they will remember this the whole day. If you want to go a step bigger, is one of the hardest exercises I've ever done. Call someone you've blamed for a lot of bad things. And then appreciate them for the good things they've done as well. Because it's never that black or white. They've always done something positive as well. And that's, in my opinion, where a lot of the healing starts. I'm curious to hear from your side, Nick, before we go deeper. What are the main reasons that you see that bring people to a very dark place? Like, what are the main triggers? Is it heartbreak? Is it yeah, you tell me.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's our capacity or lack of capacity to feel like we can cope.
Yes.
So the trigger could be heartbreak. The trigger could be a big life trauma. It could be experiencing loss. It could also be a genetic predisposition to experiencing depression or other mental challenges. But then it's also, some people might have a big life trauma or they might have a heartbreak, but they have the internal resources and the feeling that they can cope and they feel capable to reach for a tool, or they've got a mindset perhaps that is, this is only temporary. And the best way to get through this is to actually go through it rather than just stop and just give up. So I think that's why it's so important to recognize that just like you've experienced challenges, I've experienced challenges, life is always going to give us challenges to help us to grow.
Yes.
And we have to prepare ourselves in order to tackle the inevitable, whatever shape or size or pretty gift wrapped box it comes in for us. So I think it's about developing, like I say, it's like a scaffolding. inside. Do you know what scaffolding is?
Never heard
Is
that
that a
word
British
before.
word?
Probably.
So scaffolding is, you know, when you do construction work on a building
Yes.
and they put all of the supportive poles, the metal poles up outside
Yes.
when they're doing the work on the building, that's
Yes.
scaffolding in
Oh,
the
okay.
UK. So I think about it like that. It's like it's internal support system that we can build for ourselves. And people think that you have to wait for it to be really bad for you to practice an exercise or practice an intervention. And the attitude actually needs to be flipped on its head, and that it's never too soon to start. And we get to start right now, because it's the things that we do now that help us to build resilience and to help us to build those internal resources and that strong sense of self, so that when we meet life's challenges, we're meeting them as a different version of ourselves. And we're saying, you know what? I got this.
I love this part. Life is so generous. It gives you all those challenges, problems to overcome. It never stops. And I also like to say, reminded me of this. If you're going through hell, keep going, don't stop.
Keep on going.
Keep on going.
And
One more day, one more step. And I really like that you called it the breakup. You didn't call it the reason for feeling that way, for depression. You called it a trigger. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that's a really important part to understand.
yeah, and I think it's different for every single person that experiences a mental condition or experiences depression. I think one of the biggest things that we get to do is to acknowledge that everyone's experience is different. We don't know what each other is feeling at any moment in time, and we get to hold space for each other to really share and own the way that we are feeling. I think with things like depression, it's knowing that it is a complex thing, whether it's suicide prevention or mental health or depression specifically, it's a complex topic and there's no one size fits all solution. So what we get to do is we get to look at, okay, where are we at right now? Yes, we want to work with a professional to look at what the causes are. And for me, I'm not a purist, so I don't just believe in positive psychology. I feel like everybody needs to use positive psychology way more in their lives. And I'm also a big stand for doing trauma work. And I work with plant medicines. And I've tried every modality under the sun because I'm an eternal learner. And I really believe in growth. So as well as doing the positive tools that you can use in your day-to-day life, I'm looking at, okay, what was it that actually got me here in the first place? And often when you're doing trauma reprogramming and repatterning, we're looking at, was there something and what was the event in our childhood that actually sparked this pattern in the first place? So I have been a person that has experienced suicidal ideation maybe 5 times in my life. I had a suicide attempt when I was 11 years old. And then I've had different times where I felt like I've been back there again. And some of the times have been when I've had health challenges, for example, or when I felt really, really scared and I felt like I couldn't get through or I couldn't keep on going. And when I've looked back and I've tracked back to what it was that kind of made me feel that way in the first place, there's always been some sort of significant experience in my younger years that's actually impacted me today. So I think we get to explore both sides of the spectrum. We get to look at why it happened and then add on the positive psychology work that looks at, okay, what can we do with this now? So now that we have gone through these challenges or we're experiencing these challenges, we're not going to bypass them. We're not going to go into toxic positivity and just say peace and love and everything's okay. We're going to actually acknowledge, okay, this feels hard. It's bringing up these emotions, and I'm going to look at a list of emotions and actually name what I'm feeling or do my best to do that. And then I'm going to look at, okay, what am I learning through this process? what are the gifts? You said life is generous, and I think that's a beautiful way to say it. It's given us gifts, even if they don't feel like gifts at the time. They feel like they're really, really hard and would do anything not to have the problems. But what we see is that there's so many silver linings in those challenges that when we get to look at what we're actually gaining from them, most people say when they're asked that they actually wouldn't want to have not gone through the hard thing because they've gained so much because of it. And I think that's fascinating.
I mean, if we often wish for life without problems, and then if you really think about it, if we would put you into a really nice room, you get your Netflix, you get everything, we feed you, we give you everything you want, enough coffee, whatever you like, you just stay in that room. No danger, no problems, no potential breakups, nothing. We feed you, we take care of you. Would you want to live that life?
I mean, it sounds great in some respects, but no, because I mean, even if you think about how you and I are here together today, we're here because we both experienced extreme challenges in our lives, and we never would have met if it wasn't for those things.
1,000,000%. Most people would say, no, of course I don't want to live that life. It's boring.
It's boring, yeah. There's no purpose to it.
So maybe our biggest challenge here is to believe we shouldn't have any.
Yeah, it's the expectation of wanting it to be different.
You mentioned technical things, and I wanna keep this practical, also in terms of action steps. So I envision someone listening to the podcast right now and actually taking action while listening to it, just like how I read your book, pausing and then asking myself, okay, how do I want to implement this? What will I change because of this? And so we have this one thing. I would love for everybody to send someone an appreciation message or to call that person. It can also be a stranger. I did that yesterday in the gym. So there was a person, a young, I have to admit, a young attractive lady. I know she has a boyfriend because they're always walking together. They always greet everybody, say good morning. And I was like, I love giving people compliments. So I walk over, I'm like, don't worry, I know you have a boyfriend. She's like, oh, because I could see that uncomfortable. I'm like, I'm not here for that. I just want to let you know, I really appreciate how you walk in and you greet everybody. And we were using the same exercise machine, and she would adjust the seating back to, I'm really tall, back to my level. And I was like, that's so kind, just so thoughtful. Thank you. And she's like, that made my day. I'm like, yeah, mine too. So send someone this, just if it's a tiny message, it can sometimes make the day of a person who's maybe going through a tough time. And then you talked about the importance of social connections. I think there's resistance whenever there's change, right? So what could be a practical thing that someone could do to find social connections? You mentioned, like exercising together. That's one of the most beautiful thing you can probably do. That's why I love paddle. You live in the US, so probably pickleball. You do it with someone.
Yeah, and padel as well.
Yeah, you call it padel? I love it.
Yeah.
So I play paddles, something like that. I know there is things like runners clubs. Like if you're listening right now, like what is it for you? You have an interest. How could you combine that interest with social connections?
Yeah, and I think it's looking for what it is that feels easy and what brings you joy as well, because it might feel horrifying for someone to go and join a running club, whereas for someone else that might bring them joy.
Yes.
So I think it's looking for what feels like it's a easy, positive step. And there's so many communities online now as well. That is a good thing, that it's possible even without leaving your home to feel a sense of connection. And making sure that the communities that you're investing time and energy into are ones that are positive and that are bringing you joy. Because there's also a lot of communities that we can be part of that do the opposite. So I think it's being mindful of that. as well as looking at which new connections we can get, it's also valuable to look at how we can strengthen existing connections. And you gave a beautiful example of doing that with someone who's a stranger or you've kind of seen or met a few times only. We can do that with people that we know as well. So it's a way of showing that we're listening to each other and also deepening the connection that we have. And the way to do it, or the exercise that people can go and practice, is when somebody shares something good, okay, so they're sharing a celebration, and you might have to set this up if this is not a normal conversation in your life. So you could ask someone, what is it that's going well today? Or tell me something that feels good, or what are we celebrating? Now, when someone shares that celebration, instead of just saying, oh, okay, that's great, or instead of saying, well, I've got a better celebration than that, or instead of saying, well, that's not really that good, why are you celebrating that? We can respond with something that's called active constructive responding. And that would be, oh my goodness, amazing. Congratulations. I want to know more about that. Tell me something more. So you're asking another question. Yeah, like, what's the next step with that? Or what feels the most exciting for you about that? And when you start to talk with someone else about what feels good and exciting for them, you'll see their face light up. So it's a great dinner table conversation or opener to be like, what's going well? What are we celebrating? Cool, let's talk about that. It can really strengthen your relationships.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I have I don't know how if you can see it, like 7,000 questions based on
Yes.
the things you just
I'm available for it.
just said. You talked about, or you also talk in your book about your own journey, and you've just mentioned it, and that's my interpretation of it, but it sounded a bit like it's right now it's not a big thing for you. That it felt like, oh, by the way, I think it's quite an achievement. It's something remarkable. And I told you earlier, there are a couple of people that I know dearly, that I love dearly, who are going through a really, really tough time. And the podcast is called Success Leaves Clues. And I don't mean success in terms of just, whenever you say success, people think like business, money. For me, success, and I think you are on a similar page, is fulfillment, joy.
Yeah.
Living, whatever that means. And you've came out of this, and now your purpose is to get, if I understand it correctly, to get people out of this space where you know what it's like to suffer, and you don't want anybody else to suffer. So what, in your case, what were things that really helped you in that moment that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, like, I really want people to know that even if it feels hard, then they can keep going. Like, even if it feels like they're suffering, there is a brighter day on its way.
Yes.
And what we've seen is that the negative thinking is temporary. And even if you're having thoughts and feelings of suicidal thinking, it's going to go away. So you've just got to hold on, and you can get through one more day. A tool that I really love, and this is everything that I share in the book, is so basic. And I kind of was concerned that people would think, these are so simple, how are they going to work? But the reason that I know that they will work is because I had to use them. And some of them I developed when I was suffering the most. So I have a list of tiny tools that I keep in the notes section of my phone. And I used to be the girl that got up in the morning at 5 a.m. and I went to the spin class, and then I would do all of my morning ritual, and it would all be organized and in a particular order. And then when I was having these hard days, I couldn't even think about what was on the perfect morning ritual list, never mind actually do it. So having this almost like a menu of things that help you feel good to choose from. So it can be as simple as drinking a warm drink that gives you that cozy feeling, or getting outside into morning sunlight, or moving your body, or practicing a breath work. having those things as a go-to, that's where I would always start, like doing some somatic release exercises. And one of the things that I love is my GPI. So I don't know if you read that part yet in the book, but I have a thing in my phone and it's called the Good Person Inventory. And it's a folder in my photo album that I keep pictures, I keep messages and texts that people have sent me. I've even got some voice notes in there where people have sent me gratitude messages. And I put them in the GPI folder. And you could call this a rainy day folder, because essentially what I do is if I'm having a day where I feel lower than usual, I'll go to my GPI folder in my phone and I'll look at all of these memories and I'll be like, whoa, okay, cool. Like I am doing something good and I am a good human and it's all going to be okay. And that proves to be a really, really powerful reminder. So just collect them as you go through your day. Someone sends you a nice text, screenshot it, put it in there. It makes such a difference because it's hard to remember your accomplishments when you're feeling low. So it's better when you're experiencing them to give them a place to go and put them in that folder so you can come back to them when you really need them.
I love that. I even that part I recommend to business clients because it's all psychology. And whatever you focus on, you usually experience. So if you focus and on tough days or tough moments, you usually focus on something that is not so helpful, like things you can't control or the past, or you perceive a loss. And going to create this folder, whatever you want to call it, in your phone, or in maybe even, I see if you have a home, like a corner dedicated to this. You know, you can or like some people love to pin things to their fridge.
Yeah, exactly. Where you
where
can
you see
them.
it. Because whatever you also this part, it sounds very simple, but who says that simple has to be wrong? Maybe all of this is so simple. You know, like many things in life we overcomplicate it.
Yeah, why would you make it harder than it needs to be when it gets to be easy?
Yeah, it's actually there is this quote by Tony Robbins. He says complexity is the enemy of execution. And I really like it. I like to keep things simple. Like getting into shape is also like, it's not rocket science, technically. So who says that that things need to be complicated? Maybe all of this can be simple. And maybe that's the right path. So it's actually was intended to be one of my last questions for you, because it's one of the last chapters in your book. Look how far you have come. And that's a thought experiment everybody can do right now. Look how far you've come. What are moments in your life that you are most proud of? That's a question to the listener, but also a question to you, Nick. What is something that you are incredibly proud of that you've mastered? What is the first thought?
You know, one of the things that springs to mind, and this is a really random memory, I ran a retreat in Barbados 2 years ago now. And on the last day, I hired a boat for everyone to go on. And there was maybe 30 of us on the boat. And it felt really special because there was my students and they'd brought their parents and then they'd also brought their kids. So there was 3 generations, like a literal lineage. It's giving me chills saying it. There was a lineage on that boat. And one of the grandparents came up to me and she said, Nick, thank you so much. I've never been on a jet ski. I'm 74 years old. This is the first time that I've ever done this. And it's brought me so much joy. And then other people were saying, thank you so much for letting me bring my 4 kids with me on this boat. It feels really special that we get to do this together. And that made me feel like I'd created something good, because there's so many times that we're focused on the future and where we're headed and what we want to create. And that is powerful because it helps us to envisage the best possible outcome or the best possible version of ourselves. But looking at where we've already come from and how much we've poured into our mission and our work and our purpose and our lives, that was a moment in time where I really felt like I'd done a good job, because my values are grounded in growth and generosity and connection and adventure. And this experience kind of encapsulated them all into a single moment where I could say the work that I've done over the last 15 years, it was worth it for this moment to have these families having this fun. And now I'm crying, so thank you.
Well, it's 17-1 for you, because when I told you, when I read your book, or while I'm reading it, I'm tearing up all the time. I'm an emotional guy, and
Good.
when you talk about just the friends you've lost or who are not with us anymore, it makes me like it just, I felt for you, and it must have been so incredibly challenging, so incredibly painful, and yet, and that's the reason what makes me even more emotional, you don't choose hate, you don't choose to be a victim. You say, okay, I think you've lost 3 of your dearest friends because of suicide.
Yeah.
So you have all the right in the world to be angry with existence, but you choose love over hate, and that.
And I think grief is love. So when I was working on the book one more day,
Grief is love. I'm gonna say that again, because I heard it in your book for the first time. Grief is love.
Yeah, and one of the editors that was working with me on the book, she had a tragic loss as she was working on the book, and she said that it really helped her to be reading one more day, because she was having this experience, but in reading the pages and reading that grief is love, it helped her reconnect with something that felt so precious, that we had that time with our loved ones, and that the overwhelming waves of grief that we feel are indicative of how much we really cared. So I think when you feel it like that, I still get the waves of grief. They don't go away. I hear a song that reminds me of my friend, and I have a happy memory, and then all of a sudden I'm crying and I feel the wave of grief.
Yeah,
and I'm
I
like,
feel you.
it's actually a precious thing that I feel inside. It's really special.
Yeah, I did this thing. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with it. It's like kind of like Gestalt therapy. Most people know what a family constellation is, and I did one this year where someone was basically modeling my mother, and my mom died shortly after I was born, and that was the first time I basically had a real conversation, because the person who was acting like being my mother, that stuff feels really real. Like that felt like that's my mother. And one thing she said, so the first thing she says to me, we've never really spoken much, like me and the person. I still speak to my mother actually quite regularly. She's like my higher self. Whenever I'm not sure what to do, I'm like, Mom,
I love that.
can you help me out here? I'm struggling. Like, can you tell me what's the right thing to do? And she always has an answer. First thing she says, I love you, and I love you so much, and I still love you. Like every day I love you. And then she said one thing, allow yourself to grieve. Because you never did. I mean, I was 1 when she died. Like I didn't go to a funeral. I didn't go through this process of just crying for days and really feeling that loss. And now I'm 29 years old, and I grieve for the first time. Like I took 2 weeks out of my somewhat busy schedule to just say, like, I'm gonna dedicate those 2 weeks to my mother and that loss, because even though I mean, I was 1, even though I wasn't super conscious of it, it still affected me. And fuck, do I have a right to grieve about the death of my mother? Even though, like, most people don't get it. They're like, what do you mean? That was like 20 years ago. I'm like, the pain is still there. The pain still gets triggered when I have a connection with someone, and that connection is transitioning to something. That it's not the breakup. It's this same wound that was created when I lost my mother. So for me, it's a whole different experience. For some people, they're like, oh, and I had to understand that, for example, like this is some of the biggest challenge in my life, navigating, or if I look back, navigating through breakups. Because it opens the same wound. So, not sure how I got there. Grief.
But I think that that's beautiful as well. And thank you so much for sharing it, because I feel like you give people permission to really feel their emotion and to create space for it. I think there's so much harm that we do for ourselves when we push it down or we repress it or push it back. It's there and it's there for a reason. And when we're able to express it and allow it and move through it, we're actually able to open up new spaciousness within our body to actually receive more joy or receive more love in the future.
1 million%.
Oh. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of
Am I
course.
allowed?
You can always.
Thank you.
That's how I usually start my Instagram reels. Can I ask you a personal question? Should we?
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I would love to know, what was it that kept you going one more day?
If I would have known you before, I would have loved to add, you have those survivor stories, right? In your book, like in certain chapters. I would have loved to add mine, but maybe in the future. What kept me going, the answer that pops up to my head is love. Like the people around me, my siblings, and just love in general. My partner at the time, like that really was the thing. Like they're doing everything for me and they love me so much. And I'm gonna try my very best today. And literally it was one more day, because the pain, there were moments where I remember it vividly. I was on, in this room just by myself. It was pandemic. So only one person at a time could visit you. And
oh my God, it was during COVID as well.
Yeah, and the only person and also like my immune system was relatively low, and my brother would be because it was tough to see. My brother was the only person who was like, he's the right person to do this. I love him dearly. And I remember just laying there when he left for like 2-3 hours, just sobbing, just crying. I'm like, what is going on? I don't understand even why I'm crying. Like why I'm going through so much pain. But what helped me was to know there are people who love me. And I'm going to do it with them, for them. And without that, I wouldn't be here anymore. Without the people who love me, I would for sure not be here, because they believed in me and in my healing when I couldn't.
It's amazing.
And I think that is the reason why I'm still here. Like love, for sure. That all of those you mentioned, or you named them, those tools, they helped me massively. Of course, 1 million%. Also during recovery, but at the end of the day, it was social connections. It was love.
It's so beautiful and powerful, and I'm so happy that you're still here.
Thank you. Likewise. I it feels like sobbing. Sobbing podcast, but I think it's one of the most beautiful things in life when you can be really vulnerable with someone and cut the surface bullshit, because people who love you really want to know how you are, and there is no, you don't have. So when we have something to celebrate, what is the first thing you want to do when you have something good happening in your life? You want to tell someone, connect, call someone. Yeah, you want to connect. And then when something tragic is happening, when you're going through a tough time, you do the opposite. You go inside. But why? Because the people who actually love you, they want to know. Like if you're listening right now, you obviously want to know when someone you want to support. And there's beauty in that. So I I really encourage people to also talk about that. Just like, hey, this is how I really am. And you will notice the connections with people get so much more, just a whole different level, really.
I read something that put it really simply that said, if you don't reach out when you need support, you're actually robbing your friend of the opportunity to show up and be a good friend. And that would make them feel good.
I know we are over time. So my last question for you. I will at some point write a book about all of those amazing tools, all of those amazing success recipes that I get to witness here. And my vision is one day, if I choose to have kids at some point, I'll hand it over to them. So I want the best tools, the best tips, the best pieces of advice you have ever received put into this book. What would be one or two things maybe that you would like to add to the book? So it could be the best piece of advice that you've ever received. It could be one tool that they could use on a daily basis that makes such a difference in the qualities of their lives. What would it be for you if I would hand over this pen?
Okay, so my best piece of advice, and again, it's so simple, it's be comfortable and confident in being yourself. And I think that really landed for me finally in my adulthood. And just being able to wake up and be exactly the same person, no matter what it is that you're doing, whether it's on a podcast or it's going for dinner with your friends, it feels like a new level of relief. And I feel very grateful for that. The other two things that I would also recommend, one is a movement exercise, but it's not going to the gym. It's standing and shaking out your whole entire body and just allowing any sound that wants to come up and out to come out and leave you. It's so good for processing emotion and tension. And then my third one has to be dropping G-bombs. So a G-bomb is what my brother calls gratitude, because he says, Nick, you're ridiculous. You're the most grateful person in the world. Are you going to drop some G-bombs? I'm like, you know what? I am. I always am going to stand by my love of gratitude because it's a power tool. It's not just a tool, it's a power tool. So if I was going to choose one thing, then gratitude would be it.
G-bomb. I love that.
G-bombs.
G-bombs. That's how I start my day, with G-bombs.
Good.
I literally speak to myself. I speak it out loud. Like, that's the first thought I think usually during the day. Like,
Mine too.
What do I appreciate? What is good about my life? And that also sometimes during, I think you communicate that. I communicate it. We still have struggles, challenges, moments that are incredibly hard. But still, there is like, I have this deal with myself. I wake up and I want to focus on what is good about this. Because even in the shittiest situations, there is still something that you could focus on that is good and that deserves a G-bomb drop.
Oh, yes.
I did it at the beginning, but I wanna do it again, Nick, just because you touched my heart in the last couple of days. Just massive appreciation for your work, and I hope you know how important it is that your work is so profound and life-changing, and
Thank you.
I'm deeply touched by you choosing love over hate and going and being the change you want to see. Like, I really appreciate it. You said something at the beginning of this podcast that I highlighted, and I remember hearing this, and it really changed the way it became one of my life mantras. You talked about space. So when if I understand it correctly, someone who thinks of ending their lives, they are almost certain they don't have the space anymore to cope, to deal with it. And one of my favorite mantras and reminders, I have it on my phone, pops up regularly, is there's so much space, you have so much space for anything that comes. And if I don't have the space, someone else has and can help me.
I love that.
And I would that would be the end that I would like to. We painted the picture. I want people to know there's always help available. There's always space. You have so much freaking space in you, and whatever it is, there's freaking light.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Nick, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. It's been an honor, and obviously get the book. one more day, I put the link into the description box. I can highly recommend it, and I will. So big thank you, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Share this episode, especially this one, with a friend on social media. It could mean the world to someone who's going through a challenging time. And then one last thing, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe. It also helps us to, improve the show, keep bringing you the most amazing guests. It means the world if you just take 3.5 seconds, just click that subscribe button on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much, and until next week.